This program airs statewide on California Public Television and is a California's Gold classic. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. It's one of the most picturesque towns anywhere in California. Located on our central coast, San Luis Obispo is a college town filled with tree-lined streets, nice people, and a real sense of its history. It's a colorful history, too, lots of characters. In the early days, this was a frontier town, complete with ranches and cowboys. But there's another chapter in San Luis Obispo's history book as well, one that until recently many people didn't even know about. But now this almost forgotten part of this little town's past is being rediscovered and celebrated, and is a fine example of California's gold. It was a thriving community, San Luis Obispo's Chinatown, made up of people who came to California in search of a better life. From the mid-1800s, the Chinese were here, and in fact, over the years, became part of the town's texture and fabric. Then, for a variety of reasons, this little Chinatown began to fade away. Until today, the only original structure left is the famous Louis store. But the exciting thing is that now there's a reawakening of interest in the town's Chinese history. And even though the original structures are gone, its past is very much alive. If we had been here in the 1870s, 1880s, what would we have seen right here? What would it have felt like?
I think you'd have seen a lot of storefronts. You'd seen people sitting out on benches in front of their storefronts, mostly men, because a lot of the people living in Chinatown were here as a labor pool, and that labor pool was used to build roads, to build the railroads. Everybody's heard the railroads, but to build a lot of other public works projects in the area.
And was this a vibrant Chinese community?
Oh, absolutely. In the 70s and 80s, in the 90s, no question. And if you look back at the old newspaper reports in the 90s and the 80s, Chinese New Year's was a big deal here.
Now, how big was Chinatown? Where did it start? Where did it end? Was it this whole block?
It took in about 3/4 of the block. The end of the block was mostly gardens where they raised vegetables and they peddled the vegetables around town. But about a quarter of the way down the block was the Joss House, where it started Chinatown. And then next to the Joss House were several buildings. A lot of them were boarding houses where the single men lived 4 or 5 to a room, and all the way down to Howard Lewis's, the Louis store there.
So that was it, just this one block and a few stores on the side of the street that we're standing on now.
Both sides of the street. Yeah, had boarding houses and restaurants and that sort of thing.
And would the population of this Chinese community fluctuate up and down?
Oh, absolutely. It's like an accordion. If there's a big job, a public works thing, a road, a lake being drained, the railroad coming through, there would be probably many more than the census ever recorded. But even on a weekly basis, it would go like this, because these folks had jobs on the ranches. They were cooks, they were laundrymen, they worked where and when they were needed, and when they no longer had a job, they would come back here to the boarding house and hang out until somebody gave them another job. So it was like this.
How many people are we talking about average? 300, 400, 200?
The census said 330 some people, but I suspect the census is very low.
In what year?
In 1880s.
So that was the height of it.
1880, 1890. Yeah.
In California, at that time period, in the 1880s, 1890s, 10% of California's population was Chinese.
Really?
If you look at today in the United States, only 2.5% of the U.S. population is Chinese.
But at one point, 10% of the California
Right.
citizenry.
Yes.
Well, actually, though, they weren't citizens, were they?
They weren't citizens, but 1 out of every 10 Californians.
Would they have had lion dances here in San Luis Obispo?
Yes, in the 1860s, all the way to the early 20s, 1924 to be
And
exact.
when would they have had them?
Chinese New Year, okay? There's a big, huge party all the way from here down there. Oh, this is Chinatown in those days.
Big party.
Big party. Sometimes Louis' birthday, all right? Or weddings, okay?
Any excuse.
Any excuse, okay?
Now we have an excuse.
All kinds of food, you know, dancing and the music.
Well, we don't have food here today, but we are recreating what would have happened here years ago, and these are all members of...
Cal Poly Chinese Students Association Lion Dance Team.
And this club is one of the oldest on the campus, isn't it?
Yeah, formally I think our charter dates back to the 60s, but actually Louis' son, young Louis, and his wife Stella started the club back in the 1930s when they had a soda shop on the street.
Really?
So our club is a pretty old club.
Now, are the members of this club aware of the rich Chinese history here in San Luis Obispo? Because you told me most of your members come from the Bay Area.
Well, if they weren't when they came here, they soon found out. Just being involved in our club, you can't help but understand what it really means for the Chinese in San Luis Obispo. We've constantly done performances at the store here. Every year we put on, just last week we put on our 41st annual Chinese New Year banquet, and we often do skits and stories, and we explain about the history of our club each year as well. So everybody's really in tune with the history of the Chinese situation in San Luis.
Because when you think of Chinatown, you think of San Francisco, you think of the big Chinatowns, not the little ones like would have been here.
Yeah, that's true. But it's kind of interesting. You don't really expect much in the way of Chinese history here. It's really exciting to find out that a part of us has been here so long.
Now, Howard, this could have very well happened in front of your store 150 years ago.
Well, yeah, before that even. But that was a tradition. Chinese New Year's was a big thing for us. We shot off, I'll say, 100,000 firecrackers suspended from the rooftop on the pulley, fed it over, kept fitting it, and this curb was wall to wall with red Chinese firecracker paper. Wall to wall, curb to curb.
So everybody knew when it was Chinese New Year's.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they couldn't miss it. They couldn't miss it. The whole town showed up.
Now, what were you telling me?
In the 19th century, the townspeople usually complain. The heathens make lots of noise, all right? Then there's some other people who say, well, the Chinese, they do make this town lively. Otherwise, it's a little cow town, very dull, you know? The Chinese parties make this town so lively, interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you were playing like that back in the 19th century, it would be making this town lively.
Yes, and the firecrackers, and this just goes on, you know, loud noise.
Boy, it sounds
It's
so
party.
quiet when you stop. Would they have played this that loudly right through the middle of town?
Right. You can read those old newspapers, you know, they complain. The heathens make so much noise. When are they going to be civilized?
Okay, we have the instrument here from the pop culture, which is called, you've taught me the name, D?
This is called D or Deeds. It depends. And obviously, I'm using Mandarin, which is not the dialect they would have spoken around this area.
What would they have spoken here?
Dagji. That would be the Cantonese equivalent
Cantonese.
of that. So when we talk about different groups of people, the people who lived in this area is actually from the Canton province. So they would speak a different dialect and play different kinds of music.
And how would they have used this in their life here in San Luis Obispo?
Well, this instrument would have been used with a combination of, say, the bow fiddle, the erhu, or the hammer daozima yangqin, or yiwu, or yuankang. Those are the Cantonese equivalent of those
And they would have been around the house at night listening?
They would have been around the house, and people after dinner would sit at the porch. They would play this instrument by themselves. They would play a folk tune. They would play anything comes to mind, operatic tunes that would have played around this.
Now, how many people here have heard this instrument before? Everybody heard it? I'm the only one who hadn't heard this?
Right, you're the only
Where
one.
have you heard it?
Oh, all my life. In China.
So this really is an instrument that would have been used in the home for entertainment at night after dinner or whatever?
Right, correct.
Can you play this instrument?
No, I'm pretty
You play it?
In junior high school,
Oh,
we have a
really?
band.
No, I think we'll let him play it. Play for us now.
The feel sound. The particular thing about this instrument is that you notice there's a little piece of membrane on top of it.
Right
Okay,
here.
this is almost like what we call
This.
it's like a kazoo. Well, you get the buzzing quality of the instrument because this instrument used to be an outdoor instrument in the military band, in the marching band actually, around the 4th, 5th century. They would have marched with the military in this instrument.
Now, when we hear you play this today here
It's
on
a
this
ring,
spot,
this
it would have.
parking
We're
lot.
now recreating history because this could have been played very well on this very spot.
We try. I think that's the idea.
We're recreating it right now. Now this is interesting. We're coming inside the San Luis Obispo County Historical Museum to see something that ties in directly with early Chinese communities here in San Luis Obispo County, specifically Chinatown, where we've just been. And John, this is fascinating to me, and I think this is a little known part of the Chinese story here in California.
California, back in the 1850s, everybody was coming here from all over the world for the gold rush, including the Chinese. In fact, in 1852, 20,000 Chinese arrived in San Francisco. Within 10 years, there was regular boat service between San Francisco and Hong Kong. They were welcome. They were looking for gold. They were a good labor force in California. But then there was a problem with too many laborers in California and not enough jobs, high unemployment, and the European Americans started blaming the Chinese Americans for this unemployment and this recession that was going on in the 1860s and 1870s. Part of the backlash from that was that Chinese were discriminated against. There were laws passed against them, and by 1882, immigration was cut off to China. By 1892, Chinese in the United States legally were forced to carry photo IDs with them. And what we discovered here in the museum was some of the mugshots from those 1890s photo IDs.
So what we have here, and you're standing here holding one of these things with gloves on because we are not allowed to really touch them, are these wonderful glass plates. I know it's hard for the camera to see them, but these were the mug shots that were taken here in San Luis Obispo of the Chinese population.
This collection was a span of two photographers. In the 1880s and actually the 1890s, the Chinese were required to carry registration cards and certificates of residence. So these men and boys came to a local photographer and got their photo taken for these certificates.
And how big a find was this for the museum to have something like this?
Well, it started in a Chinese traveling exhibit that goes out to the local schools.
So when you look at these things, at these pictures, it's really a glimpse into lifestyles, into what the Chinese would have looked like and been like here in San Luis Obispo.
It's an incredible find from a historical perspective, because these are people whose history was not written in the local history books, and this actually shows us who they were, what they were like, you know, a little bit about their culture.
And the irony of this is that we have this today. We have this positive look into the past because of something very negative, discrimination,
right,
that took place and forced them to have their pictures
right,
taken.
Yeah, normally they probably would never have had pictures taken. A lot of them were the lowest of the economic status in California because of the discrimination, because of all of that, and it was just fortuitous that because of that they ended up being probably some of the most photographed people in the community.
And these faces that we're seeing here on these mugshots, if you will, are the faces of the men, and it looks like many young boys, who actually built California.
Right. These are the people that built the roads. They're the people that built the mines. They're the people that drained the lakes for agriculture. These are the people that put California together.
Now, John, here comes the interesting part of our story, another interesting part of our story, because standing here where Chinatown used to be is now a public parking structure. And that in itself is a story, isn't it?
Well, the community that lived here was kind of forgotten. The buildings torn down in the 50s. It was just a vacant lot for years. The city decided they needed more parking in the downtown area. It looked like a handy vacant lot to turn into a parking structure. But then they realized that somewhere there in the past was Chinatown. So before they actually built the parking structure, they hired an archaeological team to come out and start excavating, and the amount of stuff that was uncovered during that excavation was incredible.
Now, when did this take place?
About 1987.
And what did you find when did you just start digging where old Chinatown used to be?
The archaeological firm laid out a grid system and just started digging square holes in the ground, not knowing where anything was originally, and within a day or two started coming across trash pits, foundation footings, all kinds of things left over from the original Chinatown.
That was kind of a key to the past.
Absolutely. It was it was uncovering this lost history.
Okay, the plot thickens because now we have left the old Chinatown in downtown San Luis Obispo. We're on the campus of Cal Poly. This is the agricultural campus, and John, you brought us here to show us what?
Well, this is where the 5 tons of artifacts that were taken out of the ground when they built the parking structure downtown all ended up here at Cal Poly, and the campus was nice enough to donate to us the use of this old chicken processing lab that they had that they weren't using this building.
That was nice of them, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it's nice.
Yeah, there it is. It's got archaeological and historical research sign up on the side of it.
Yep.
And here's some of the research that you're doing. This is basically stuff that you just got out of the ground.
Right, came right out of the ground. It went into storage for about 10 years. No one knows what's in these bags right here. This is just one bag of 5 tons of historical artifacts.
Well, now we know what some of these bags had in them, and that's inside here, right?
Yeah.
All right, come on, this adventure continues. That's heavy, be careful. We're going inside the chicken coop.
Okay. We are here now. Ooh.
Oh boy, right off the bat. This came from old Chinatown.
Right, this came out of one of the trash pits that was located right behind those buildings that were there in the 1800s. And this all goes together. We'll end up piecing this together.
And all of this, all of these old glass.
Food storage jars, soy sauce pots,
An old pitcher?
And a pitcher. Uh-huh.
Oh, and look at this.
A little wine decanter.
Oh, wow.
Imported from China. Teapots. This would have had a little bale handle up here.
And this was all excavated.
All came out of the ground.
And wait a minute, look over here. Look at this. She's got a whole table full of glass.
Everything gets sorted. The glass gets sorted by color, and then whether it's a bottle glass or window glass. Chimney, this is lamp chimneys from kerosene lamps.
Wow.
And all this stuff gets sorted and cataloged and weighed. All the information goes into the computer.
And you're just sitting here looking at it.
Well, I got a little done. I got a piece here glued together,
But I guess part of it is just sitting here looking and figuring out what goes where.
Exactly. But the hard part is you pick up a piece like this and you say, wait, I remember seeing something with that curve to it. And then you start looking for that next piece.
This is unusual to find. During the excavation, this was one of the few pieces that was complete. I mean, if you think about throwing out your trash, most of what you throw out is broken into little bits. But this big storage jar or shipping jar that came from China was complete. And it would have had a top that was tied down with line through these little pieces.
How old is this?
This is at least 150 years old.
Wow.
This is an example of something that we've just found with a lot of Chinese characters on it, and we've begun the translation of these characters. Everyone's in agreement that this was part of one of the brush holders that would have been used to hold a Chinese writing brush, which indicates that we are dealing with people that were very intelligent, educated people in Chinatown. And there's poetry written on the side of this, which...
Do we know what it says?
Well, I can pick out individual words, but
That's
not
the only
quite.
thing we can do. Just some words.
People,
Disconnected.
soldier. Looks like a poetry of some kind.
So we're just seeing part of the poem because it went all the way up.
Those sections are important, though. There's a section here that says if you don't focus on quality, your soul may fly away. There's another section that talks about if the soldier is a good soldier, you don't need a whole army. All you need is one soldier.
Lots of proverbs.
Yeah. This is the identification board that all of my volunteers use. If they find a piece of pottery or a piece of bone or something, they bring it over to the board and they can compare it to what's on the board and be able to figure out where it came from and what design it is. This was put together by several archeologists that have worked on Chinese archaeological sites all over the state and have identified the various types of pottery.
And how does this site compare with other archaeological sites around the state?
The most interesting thing about this site is that it is a site that shows two cultures coming together. Most archaeological sites, they're either all Native American sites or they're all European sites. But in Chinatown, there were two cultures coming together, the European culture, the Chinese culture. And looking at how those two cultures worked together or didn't work together is something that we can study here by studying the trash left behind by the people that were living there.
And what will all of this mean to the local Chinese American community here in San Luis Obispo when all of this is sifted and sorted and labeled?
I feel, I've been here, let's say, 13 years, okay? When I first came here, I feel the Chinese were the guests of this country. After I've learned so much, I've realized that the Chinese were the pioneers, just like the Europeans, just like the Yankees coming from the East. There was a saying, the people come from the East Coast, young men go west, all right, to open up California. But according to the historian, Sandy Leiden, he also did the same kind of thing in Monterey Bay region. And he said, actually, there's another pioneer coming from the Chinese, the other side, and they are looking west. And they're looking east, all right? So they would have said pretty much similar thing. Young man, go east. And this pioneer is wearing a queue, okay? Cotton jackets, not like the other pioneer who wore leather boots with a wagon and a horse. So this pioneer is barefoot, okay, queue on the head, and cotton jackets, and looking east, that they had come east.
In search of their fortune.
In search their fortune. And actually helped to build, I shouldn't use the word help, came to build a new nation.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727 and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.